All right, number three tonight. We had a guest lined up. The guest wasn't able to make it. Scheduling conflicts, these things happen. That's fine. So we decided with Venom 2 Let There Be Carnage coming here in a couple of weeks that we would do a Breton and Greg at the movies at home retro review of 2018's Venom. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to do this in the same style that we did all of the MCU reviews for the extra episodes. So we're going to go through the budget, the gross, starring, Stan Lee cameo, all that stuff. If you haven't listened to those, I don't know what you're doing. Go listen to them. They're great. I listened to them myself.
Me too.
That's how good they were. And I usually don't listen after we're done and get things out. I don't listen to it. But I actually did go back and listen to the MCU stuff. So Venom 2018, a budget of 116 million, which is pretty low, especially going back and looking at some of those MCU movies. They were almost uniformly in the 200 millions. And the gross was an impressive 856 million. Relatively small cast. You had Tom Hardy as Eddie Brock in Venom. He also did the voice of Venom. Michelle Williams as Anne Wei Ying. And Riz Ahmed as Carlton Drake / Riot. Weird seeing him without facial hair to me.
It was, I knew it was him, and I had to keep telling myself that's him.
Because it was weird. He looked almost plastic, like CG.
Yeah.
Like
he's got very good skin.
I guess. I don't
Beautiful
know.
Skin.
Don't light a
great actor. Just a great actor though.
Yeah. He looked manufactured. The villain was Carlton Drake / Riot, another symbiote. The Stan Lee cameo was at the end. He tells Eddie not to give up on Ian. Either one of you guys, implying that he is aware of Venom's presence, which is kind of funny. So before we get into the movie, there's a lot about kind of the making of the movie that's pretty interesting. Or do you want to say, let's save that for after?
Okay.
What did you think of, because this was both of our first time seeing this. What did you think of Venom?
I remember when it came out, and I was going to go see it, and it was in Juneau. And a lot of times movies would only play for a weekend or a week, I should say. And it was just a bad week, and I just couldn't see it. And I was bummed out because, I thought it looked, at least at the worst, fun. And so it's been a long time, and I'm glad I watched it today, and it was way better than it needed to be. Way better than it needed to be. It was just, like you said, it was a small cast. I'd like that about it. It was basically just, nuts and bolts of making these kind of movies. The storyline was just enough to kind of keep you going, to give you that. I think the whole idea of this was to build to obviously, but when you're watching it, you're like, this is building to something bigger, which is the Carnage revelation. And I liked every single person in this movie too, for what their role was. Tom Hardy was great. It was, Riz Ahmed was, I thought, really good as a villain. He was actually a villain that was villainous and didn't the actual stake of the world was, in his hands. He wanted to take on his symbiote, and it was a good villain, which it wasn't the opposite of Eddie, it wasn't the opposite of him. It wasn't like the normal Marvel trope. It was just this guy that was basically like, I don't give a crap. And so I thought, when I looked at the Rotten Tomatoes score and I saw how low it was, I was like, well, shockingly low. But then I saw the user score. Mm-hmm. And then a couple people that I follow on Instagram or Twitter love this movie, love it. They rank it higher than a lot of the MCU movies. And I'm like, okay. And I still was going in kind of skeptical, but I just thought it was a fast movie too. I thought this movie was good. I mean, I definitely recommend it before I thought it was really good. It's really fast. It's funny enough. I love the banter between Venom and Eddie. I think that's really good. I thought the connection to him and Anne is just good enough too. There's just, and Michelle Williams is an amazing actress. So to have the people they have in this movie, all people that, really have been nominated for awards or won awards, doing this kind of movie, when it's not an MCU movie, I think was really terrific. So, it's not, I don't know where, if we were to rank everything, and I'm not going to do that again, I don't know where I would rank it in the MCU movies, because this just is different. But I do think it's very good. Like I said, I think it's better than it needed to be to still be enjoyable. And I really enjoyed it.
Fast, it moved fast. Like you said, I was shocked at the runtime. It's only about an hour and 45 minutes, less than that with credits. The first act of the movie I found to be a little boring. I was questioning, I had this whole argument ready, right? I had this whole argument ready through the first and maybe even a little bit part of the second act, where it's just kind of establishing that Eddie Brock is a loser, but the reality of it is he's kind of not a loser. Like there's this whole thing the whole way through that Eddie's this loser, but he's actually was a very successful investigative journalist prior to being fired for being a good investigative journalist. Like he got fired for being good at his job. You know what I mean? And he did some shady shit, but I would imagine that a lot of investigative journalists will do that from time to time to get a scoop or to get a story. I don't know. I'm not an investigative journalist yet.
I will tell you that you do what you can within the legal boundaries.
Right.
I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. So what he did, none of that was technically illegal.
I wasn't 100% sure on like what exactly it was that got Michelle Williams' character fired for what he did. Was it because he went on her laptop and looked at stuff and then used it as a source?
Yeah.
But then he never said that that was his source though. So how could they link that?
They
so I
probably
kind of felt like
assumed.
That's a little bit of a plot hole.
Yeah. Right.
So through the first act, part of the second act, I had this argument in my head. I was formulating this argument that Tom Hardy is a very Scottie Pippen actor. Like he's a great number two. Inception, great number two. Dark Knight Rises, great number two. Mad Max? He's the lead, but he's not really the lead.
Right.
Great number two. Can he really carry a film? It wasn't until Venom, took over him, they started to share this symbiotic relationship, that I really felt his performance started to shine. And that kind of left that argument for me in the dust for the second half of the movie. Because I felt like he's basically acting like a schizo, you know what I mean? Like somebody with multiple personality syndrome or whatever. And I thought that that is really what carried the movie through the second half. I felt like, I know that they marketed this as almost as like an action horror movie. I didn't feel that way at all. It just felt like a Marvel movie to me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It didn't feel like it was anything other than a Marvel movie in some respects. Obviously, it's not technically a Marvel movie from Marvel Studios, but it's a Marvel movie, right?
It's an association with Marvel, as they said in the preview or whatever for it.
Right. And there's a whole thing, and we'll get into a lot of that. But I would argue against, what you're saying as far as the Carlton Drake character or the villain, because really, like, yes, he's the villain. He's the human antagonist. And he's not like Eddie. Eddie is a good guy, right? He's a good guy. And Carlton Drake is like a kind of a scumbag. I mean, he's sacrificing poor people. He's doing whatever. The needs, but that's sort of the thing, though, is that he's the ends justify the means character. And as far as like the final battle, it did still kind of fall into that trope of good version versus bad version with Venom versus Riot. And I don't know what else you do here for that, especially as you're introducing this character, but it did fall into that trope. Where would I rank this if it were part of the MCU? Where would I put it? Somewhere in the middle, bottom middle. You know what I mean? It is like, I mean, if you look at the numbers, by the numbers, by the cast, by the actual budget, it is basically a budget Marvel movie. You know what I mean? So, but at the same time, when you look at that, I find it fascinating when you look on Rotten Tomatoes or you look on Metacritic, and there's such a gap between critical and user scores.
Right.
And you see this with Venom and the other two things that are like so readily weird to me that the gap is so large is The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker. The Last Jedi is like a 90 on Metacritic critical, or like a high 80, and it's like a somewhere in the 50s.
Wow.
Score. And it's just weird to me that the the critics get it so skewed one way and the fans get it so skewed the other. I think that what really carries this is it's just such a popular character, and it's never really gotten its due. It was like the character was not great in Spider-Man 3.
No.
And there was also some hype around this, that this was maybe going to connect to the MCU, which is another thing we'll talk about in a second. And I think that the character being immensely popular is really what carried this. It almost made $1 billion. You know what I mean?
The fans really, for the longest time, have wanted Venom to be a big character because he's one of the few villains, and he's not really a villain. He develops more into an anti-hero. He is initially Spider-Man's, antagonist, but he does become more of an anti-hero in the comic books. He has his own comic, and he's,
right,
this character that looks the way he does, which is, very rare for Marvel or DC. Yeah, there we go. Exactly. Nice. That's pretty sweet.
I didn't even plan that, actually.
That's awesome.
Up I grabbed.
So, and I get it, like after seeing it, and then I understand why it has become, I hate to say it's a cult classic because it made $800 million, but it does feel like that, even though it made so much money, because there is just this thing about people that like this movie are like in love with it. It's just really, really funny to me. And I wouldn't put myself there, but I do enjoy it. I don't feel bad that I, rented it today. There's nothing about what I did, watching it. There's nothing, I didn't feel like A, I wasted time. B, I spent a little bit of money to watch it, and, C, we're talking about it. Like I have no regrets on any of that. It's way better than, like you said, it's in the middle, bottom middle of the MCU movies. And that seems fair. And I think no matter who did it, a Venom movie would always kind of be like that, because it's a weird character. As popular as he is, it's still a weird character.
So let's get into that a little bit. I think that's a good Greg way. Venom as a lead character has had a somewhat tortured development. New Line originally had the rights and was developing a film that would have seen Dolph Lundgren,
holy crap,
as the titular character in 1997. That would have been a disaster. The rights would eventually move to Sony, and Venom would appear in the third film of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy. Originally, Topher Grace's Eddie Brock was a small cameo, but Sony production wanted to see him evolve into a main character that would help the franchise have legs in the same way the solo Wolverine's outings did for the X-Men franchise. Venom was being developed alongside Spider-Man 4. However, Tobey Maguire, Topher Grace, and Sam Raimi all opted out, and Venom would be reimagined from the ground up in the same way the Andrew Garfield-led Amazing Spider-Man movies would be. Eventually, Venom would be set to add on to the Amazing franchise, but as we covered in our MCU in review Phase 3 Part 1, see issue 3, the Amazing franchise was scrapped in favor of an MCU crossover in which Tom Holland became Spider-Man. In 2016, the film would see a revival with Deadpool and Logan succeeding in the R-rated superhero space. The idea was to launch a shared universe of Sony-owned Spider-Man Marvel properties. The film does not connect to the MCU version of Spider-Man, according to Marvel boss Kevin Feige, but producers at Sony have said the film is adjunct to Tom Holland's Spider-Man, and he could pop up at some point in future Sony MU projects. The film was panned critically with a 38% on Rotten Tomatoes, as we said, but fans of the anti-hero came out in droves as the film scored $836 million at the box office, and sits at an 80% fan rating on Rotten Tomatoes. The film is based heavily on two comic arcs, 1993's Venom, Lethal Protector, and 1995's Planet of the Symbiotes. Venom's first comic appearance was in the Amazing Spider-Man issue number 252, May 1984, which predates both of us, by the way.
Yeah.
As the symbiote, when his first host, Peter Parker, was Peter Parker, the black Spider-Man suit, obviously, and his first full appearance as Venom was Amazing Spider-Man 300 in 1988, which shows how long these things get planned out. You know what I mean? It's crazy.
Right.
He was introduced as one of Spider-Man's primary arch enemies, a dark reflection of Peter Parker, and would evolve into an anti-hero over time. He was ranked number 22 on IGN's list of best comic book villains. So I think one of the questions that really needs asked here is, there's been talk back and forth about the possibility of this Venom or this iteration of Venom eventually crossing over into the MCU. Do you think that that is possible?
Yes, because of money. And, you know, I think at this point, you know, the fact that they were able to get Spider-Man into the MCU, and then you take the most popular character in the Spider-Man comic books other than Spider-Man, I feel like you know, whether it does happen, I would say the odds are like 55-45 it happens. It's not a lot, but I think if people go after it enough, they're going to try to do something to get this character in the MCU. I don't necessarily think it's needed, because we've always said that Spider-Man has the best villains, and we can live without a Venom character in those movies. You know, would it be cool? Sure, it'd be cool. It's not needed. Spider-Man has so many villains that these movies can go on, and we haven't needed it yet. And we know going forward, obviously not gonna be in the next one. So I don't.
Wouldn't that be a trip?
That would be incredible.
Wouldn't that be insane?
If it happens, it'll be the loudest reaction in the theater that isn't Infinity War Endgame.
I don't know. I think it might beat that.
I mean, the loudest reaction I've had to the theater was when Captain America got the hammer. That's the loudest I've ever been in a theater. That was insane. I don't know if Venom shows up, but man, you're right. I don't know, especially since people are it's been so long to be in that big time Marvel movie. Maybe people would just be so coiled up, ready to attack, ready to just go nuts.
Well, and the other thing is that
it'd be sick. I would lose my mind if it happened.
So the two loudest, Cap picking up the hammer and Thor showing up in Wakanda, are the two loudest pops, we borrow a wrestling term, pops that have ever happened in a theater outside of Samuel L. Jackson delivering that iconic line in Snakes on a Plane. I think that this would beat that. And the reason why, Thor is awesome. We know this, right? Yes. Especially that version of Thor. Yeah. That scene with Captain America, we've been building to that for 12 movies or whatever, right?
Right.
This is Spider-Man, the most popular Marvel character by a country mile.
Yeah.
Probably the most popular comic book character not named Batman.
Yeah.
Maybe even more so than Batman. I mean, I would argue that, but I would argue Batman's more popular, but some may say Spider-Man. And so to have this, when it would almost be a complete misdirection. Everybody, we know about Doc Ock. We know about Shocker, or Elektra, rather. We're pretty sure Toby and Garfield show up.
Right.
Tom Hardy showed up as Venom, it would bring the house down.
I'm rooting for it. Because that'd be insane.
It would be Hulk Hogan showing up as the 30th guy in the Royal Rumble. You know what I mean? It would just completely bring the house down. But it's not going to happen. So,
right.
I mean, we can talk about it. It would be amazing. But
I would love for it to happen. I would for so many reasons. just to see what that reaction would be like. I would definitely,
It would almost be a bummer because it's not going to be full theaters. You know what I mean?
right.
Because of everything. But my God, it would totally bring the house down. I don't think, getting back to the original question, I don't think that they can bring this version of Venom to the MCU.
Really?
He's already a hero. You know what I mean? And
well, I mean, it could be a thing where he's not the villain.
I don't think you want that though.
I don't want that, but I'm saying that could be what they do.
I think if you want Venom, he's got to be opposing Spider-Man. And that was a lot of the critical flack that this movie got, was that the character was just not as interesting had it been with Spider-Man. I mean, I would certainly argue this movie was better than Spider-Man 3.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
There's no doubt that it was. I think there's no doubt, because Spider-Man 3 is not great. And this movie was good. I wouldn't say it was great. I would say it was average to good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just don't know that they can bring this version over. But I also think that the Telltale, we may know more about the prospects of Venom crossing over to the MCU with Let There Be Carnage rather than Far From Home. I would imagine.
Right.
I think we probably get a better sense of if that's a possibility after Let There Be Carnage. Do you plan on seeing, I guess this is the last follow-up question, but do you plan on seeing Let There Be Carnage in theaters?
Yeah, this definitely made me want to go see it in theaters. I also just have this thing where, like, after you start seeing these movies in theaters, after seeing Shang-Chi, that experience is just good and it's fun. There's not that many people in theaters right now, which is a good thing and a bad thing considering what's going on. There is obviously the joy of seeing a packed theater with a good movie. But I'm not going to see it opening night. I just don't think I'll do that. It's not in that realm of things, but I'll definitely see it. Probably like a Tuesday matinee, catch it. And, you think you'll see it in theaters?
I doubt it. If I can sneak off on like a Monday or a Friday afternoon when, people are in school and stuff like that, then I might, but it's not, because it's not an MCU or a Star Wars movie, it's not a priority for me and this podcast. You know what I mean? Like if it came straight to on demand, it'd be a lock. Like, even if it were just like, hey, it's on demand, but you got to pay $20, I'd pay $20 to see it on demand. I just don't want to, like, it's not priority for me to get to the theater, basically.
Okay.
So we'll see. I mean, if we're both able to, we'll review it. And if not, then we'll just wait and review it when it's streaming. Because a lot of people, that's the choice that they're going to make to see it anyway. So,
right.
Yeah.